And so I'm Evelyn LaChapelle, the program associate. I'm many hats at a nonprofit, right? So Reentry program, and then moving into events soon. But I have found myself here because I received an 87-month sentence in prison for cannabis. And so of those 87 months, I sat in prison for a total of 5 years for depositing cannabis profits into my bank account. And like so many other folks, when you come home, you are convinced that cannabis is evil and you don't want to touch it, think about it. I was like, no way. But I came home and went to work at the Omni in San Francisco, and that's what I was doing prior to prison. I have a degree, I have a resume, I events coordinator, and someone Googled my name, took it to HR, and the lady asked me to pack up my belongings and leave the office that day. And that's when the shift occurred in even someone like myself with a degree from Loyola, with a resume from Marriott Convention Center, would be faced with having doors closed in my face. Was like a major wake-up call. Was luckily introduced to Last Prisoner Project, who is really doing the groundwork on helping folks come home. And so with my help, we are now being able to help folks once they get home, because doors are closing. We all believe that we deserve a space in the industry, but how do we participate in an industry that has already wronged us, that is not intrinsically inclusive of us, and then the government's federal probation, parole, all of that, most social equity licensing, even hiring in dispensaries has excluded us from participating in plant touching business. And so super pleased to have a panel that is participating in the industry without touching the plant. And that is just knowledge that I think so many of us are missing, because when you think of the industry, when you think of social equity, it goes straight to dispensary ownership. And no one is thinking that there's marketing firms, there's accounting firms, there's hiring firms. Like there's so much more opportunity in this space. And that is what this particular webinar is about. And the ones that we have had in the past is how can you come into this space doing what you already love to do, possibly, or a new skill or a transferable skill in the industry that already owes us so much. So that is my spiel. Thank you all. I will let Trey take over from here, and then I will I'll say this first. I will drop the links to next month's webinar in the chats. Next month's webinar will be how and when to disclose your felony to employers. This one will be recorded and shared. Any other housekeeping? And you can visit lastprisonproject.org if you are negatively impacted by the war on cannabis. We have so many other resources, and I'll drop that link as well for you to get connected. And the floor is yours, Trey. Oh, and you're still muted.
Thank you. I don't think we've started to record yet, so it looks like.
Now I'm on mute. It is recording. I've learned my lesson. It started recording from the moment we turned the webinar on. Okay. I learned that lesson, and we'll just have to edit out the lateness.
No worries at all. Thank you very much. And thank you for your inspiring story and doing the leadership work that you're doing. You know, I can only imagine that having an experience like yours can just be crushing. And so just to have the energy and the fortitude to stick with it and say, no, this is going to work. All the admiration in the world, and thank you for that. And I know we have other people on the call too today who have been through similar situations. So before we get to your questions, we want to make sure everybody knows that we have an opportunity to ask questions in the Q&A button below. And we want to introduce our guests here. I want to ask them to introduce themselves. My name is Trey Reckling. I'm the director and founder of the Academy of Cannabis Science. We work with Last Prisoner Project and with accredited institutions to prepare people for careers in this space. And if you're not aware, make sure to connect with Evelyn, because we do offer scholarship programs to our coursework, and we'd be more than happy to help prepare anybody on the call who qualifies to have some job training and some industry introduction. And speaking of industry introduction, we are very pleased to have our three guests on today. Three women who are leading in the space, and each in a different way. It's really cool. It's a testament to the fact that some people think, well, the only way to work in this industry is as a bud tender, and every guest on here today shows that that's not true. And there are many, many opportunities to succeed. So if you don't mind, I'm going to start in my left to right and ask Wendy, if you don't mind introducing yourselves, tell us who you are and what you're doing.
Sure. First, thank you for inviting me to be on here. It's an honor to be here, and it's also an honor to be in the cannabis space. My name is Wendy Hull. I'm located in Washington State, down in Vancouver. I am the CEO of a company called Fairwinds, and we are a producer processor. We grow cannabis, and we also produce very medically focused products. So we make products like capsules and tinctures and topicals, very ailment specific focused. Over the years, we've really focused on providing really high quality products, being very transparent in the products that we do provide. And, you know, we really focus on science and technology. Also, I will say this because it is applicable. I love this topic. I'm also on the board of a nonprofit called Empower Women. And what we focus on is we focus on getting women trained, getting them skills and resources to get back into the workforce. We also help them with clothing or anything that they need to better themselves, and provide scholarship opportunities for different careers like science, math, anything like that. So that's also a passion of mine.
Thank you, Wendy. And thank you for Fairwinds for being so patient focused. I know as a patient myself, patient advocate, and somebody who works with, you know, a network of patients, the name Fairwinds is well traveled and well respected, and I know you all do a lot of work to focus on that community who is responsible for us having all legal cannabis. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Brittany Packer, how you doing, Brittany?
I am doing wonderful. Thank you all for having me on as well. This topic is one that hits really close to home for me. But before I get there, my name is Brittany Packer. I'm the founder and CEO of A Green Legacy. It's an organization which centers and supports underrepresented cannabis entrepreneurs through community, education, and then also partnership and support services. I'm also a marketing and comms consultant, and also a writer for both Leafly and also for Weed Maps. I freelance, and then also for a few other smaller publications that are local to where I am in Washington State. I've been in the cannabis industry for a little over 2 years, and I actually got one of my first introductions to my formal, I guess, profession in cannabis through the Academy of Cannabis Science, because I got my medical marijuana consultant certification from there. So that's how I met Trey. I've actually had a few different career changes in my life. I was an elementary teacher for about 4 years, and then I was like, ooh, I'm getting burned out there, and I moved into marketing. And so I did that within the tech space also for about 4 years. And then I ended up moving into sales within brand partnerships at Leafly. I ended up being laid off in early 2020, and that ended up kind of catapulting me into this other space that I'm in this industry that I really love and adore. And then I'm also a mom too. So got my hands in a lot of buckets, but I'm so excited to be here. I'm the daughter of someone who was previously incarcerated. And so thinking of witnessing my dad, who had a long career in HR. He had multiple degrees and still ended up incarcerated. and seeing the impact that that had on my family, seeing the impact that that had on him after coming out of the system has definitely driven a lot of the work that I do. It's driven a lot of the things that I actually enjoy just doing for fun. So I'm excited to be here with you all today.
And thank you for sharing that. And I hope we can get to the, to the whole idea that an experience like that can just make you cautious. Like Evelyn said in our lead up, that you're like, there's been too much trouble around the subject. I don't even know if I want to go into this industry just because I've been burned there before. So I hope that we'll get a chance to get there, and thank you for sharing. And thank you for the work that you do with the Green Legacy. And I hope that each of you will put your contact information or your social media contacts in so people can follow you. Brittany does a series of very high level, fun, engaging conversations with professionals as well. So there are many ways to network in this industry, but following a group like Brittany's is a great way to get started and really get connected with some really good, heartfelt people, because not everybody in the industry is somebody you want to hang with, right? And so if we can help you by introducing you to some of our friends, not that our friends are the best, but we got some good people on here. And I think we got a lot of nice people, smart people that we can endorse. So thank you, Brittany.
Thank you so much, Trey, for that.
And Caitlein, how are you doing today? Tell us about you.
Doing really well. Thanks, Trey. And side note, I think our friends are the best. I don't know. I'm just saying. So my name is Caitlein Ryan, and I'm the Interim Executive Director for the Cannabis Alliance and also Board President. I'm also the founder of Sound Cultivation, which is a political consulting firm working with local governments and industry licensees. And then I'm invested in a Tier 3 producer processor in Central Washington called Boggy Boone. And with the Cannabis Alliance, we're dedicated to the advancement of a vital, ethical, and sustainable cannabis industry. And we do a lot of work with licensees and support work around regulatory issues. We also have a robust legislative agenda. We helped get expungement of misdemeanors passed a couple of years ago, and we are working with legislators now to extend that to felonies, which is a little bit more complicated in terms of legislation and how to address that. But in the meantime, we're also working with Last Prisoner Project and then other community partners on finding ways to help folks with felonies as individuals without a broader program in the meantime. Also with the Alliance, we've got lots of other community programs. We've got education, community outreach, sustainability and packaging and things like that. And you're gonna hear this from me a lot over the next hour, and that is, there are lots of different ways to get involved in this industry, and the first and foremost easiest way to just get plugged in is to get involved in any industry organization. I, of course, am partial to the Cannabis Alliance, but just getting to meet and talk to folks who are in it and learning all of the different ways that you can plug in. A little nervous, so I forgot to say I am also so honored to be here and to be included with this extraordinary panel of folks. I'm excited to hear and learn from Brittany and Wendy today too.
As am I. And sometimes we'll do this like a Q&A kind of thing, but I really want to make sure that the floor is open. So if somebody says something, feel free to jump in and tag in on a subject or a sentiment. But if we could start out by talking about the industry itself, we know the industry pre-existed long before legal cannabis, right? It's been going on for thousands of years, and probably the reason why cannabis was so widespread because people helped carry the seeds and the product and distribute it worldwide. So we know that the industry is not new, but the legal industry is new in this era, at least. It's very white male dominated. I'll be the first to say, and that's a shame because it's the first time we've had an industry where we should be considering everybody, or it's the first time we've been, I guess, hopefully more evolved to the point that we want to consider involving everybody, but that's not the way it's worked out so far. A lot of work around equity, but sometimes those conversations come after the fact or after the first round of licenses. So there's so much work to do on that front, as Caitlein has begun to allude to. But could you talk to us a little bit about the industry itself? How it may be different or how it may be the same. It is a unique environment. And anybody want to talk about that? You've each had a cool, different experience with it.
I don't mind jumping in here. coming from a few different industries prior to cannabis, I would say that there's actually a lot more similarities than I think a lot of people think of. You know, there's a lot of regulation still, which felt very tied to my time in education. There's also a need for really every position that you see in any other industry, it's needed within cannabis. And so some of those skills transfer so easily. Myself working in comms, there are some things that need to be tweaked when I'm writing in cannabis, but really, you know, the skills are the same. The taxonomy and how you do things, you know, is very similar. So there are similarities, but the industry is extremely new. And so one thing that I didn't realize, or one opportunity that I had when I worked at Leafly, I was working in sales. I was working with a lot of the people that I was talking to were either they had just started their cannabis business, or they had been in the industry for a while, but they were in a role like a sales leadership role, or they were in a marketing leadership role, or they were just like a new CEO. And so one thing that I realized is that within this industry, everything is so new and everything changes so rapidly around what can be done and what can't be done. And so it ends up being a situation where you're constantly working with people who are very new to what they're doing, and they're very new to this iteration of the industry. And the regulated industry it's pretty tricky. Funding is a lot harder. So that also ends up being a huge differentiator too, when working with clients who may not have any funding, who may have very little funding, or funding that's not segmented, but it's they may have funding from like a grant that might not even be renewed. And so you see a lot of coming and going, which I think is kind of new to this industry, but also a lot of potential, just because everything is needed. So you got to wear a lot of different hats, and one of those hats may take you in a different direction.
Yeah, and thanks for pointing that out, because it's not just access to licenses, but it's access to money too.
Yes.
And few people have enough money on their own to just start out hitting the ground running in a big way.
Absolutely.
Wendy, Caitlein, would you like to contribute with your own perspective?
Yeah, I'll jump in just a second. You know, we say that in the cannabis industry, it's sort of like dog years, right? 1 year actually represents nearly a decade, because everything changes very, very quickly, which is a challenge, especially if you're starting a business, absolutely. On the other hand, that also provides a lot of opportunity if you're just starting out. Because of that change, everybody's learning all the time also. And so you're not really behind the 8 ball too terribly much when you're coming in at the beginning, or when you're new to it anyways.
Yeah, I'll just kind of add on to what they said. You know, I always call it business at the speed of light, because that's what it feels like at times. You know, we pivot very quickly based on a lot of different things. You know, it's interesting because it is a new industry. There's a lot of opportunity, but in the same breath, kind of like what Brittany said, it's also, when you break it down into the finite pieces, you're still looking at things like, you know, people who have a science background, or packaging, or growers of, you know, of any kind of plant, really. And so, you know, I think one thing that's been really important for us is to be able to tap into small industries and small segments that are really already existing, and, you know, hire really good people who are looking to get into this industry. But there's a ton of opportunity. It's not always easy. I always tell our staff that if it were easy, everybody would be doing it. And it also creates a really good story of, you know, looking at medical days, and then just how it's going through this legal process. And now, at least in Washington State, being almost 10 years into this, you know, getting ready to revisit, and there's a need to revisit regulations that are currently existing. So we're going to keep going, I think, through some evolutions here.
Absolutely. And we all have to remember, just because it's legal, the fight is far from over, because there's still relationships to develop with regulators. things to challenge regulators on, but from the amount of packaging required to testing to every little thing. Speaking and to y'all's point too, you have to stay on top of it. You can't rest on your laurels of what you know, because what you know today might not be viable a few years from now. Brittany, when you started at Leafly, they were just talking about indica, sativa, and hybrid, and now they've helped change their language in the way they talk about cannabis too. And so, just a little thing like going into a job interview and just speaking in yesterday's language, somebody might go, is this person up to date on the evolution of how we speak about it? But speaking about that evolution, could you all speak about using the transferable skills you have? I know, Brittany, you inferred about, a lot of things are the same, and you can bring a lot of your skills to the table for this industry as well. Does anybody want to talk about how your transferable skills helped you in this area? And then, or maybe a challenge you had trying to convince people that you had a place based on your experience?
I could start. So I don't know if I mentioned this before, but prior to starting Fairwinds with my husband, I worked for the federal government for 26 years. And I had a high-level executive position there. I was about 9 years away from retirement when I decided I wanted to leave and get into the cannabis industry. And my role in the government, I had a great opportunity where I oversaw a variety of different sections, such as emergency management, security, HR, contracting, and that background, quality management. I don't know if you guys remember going through that kind of phase of business, but it gave me an awesome opportunity to, transfer those skills at Fairwinds and really create processes, focusing on processes and documentation and SOPs, just like every other company has. And so to me, I transferred all the skills that I had utilized, and anything that I was lacking, I'm very clear on what my strengths are and where my strengths are not. And so we do a really good job of hiring people who help supplement areas that we need and that we're void of, since we're not going to have all the skills. But it's a legitimate business, and to me, all those skills that you have, whether it's packaging or being a biologist, transfer over to this industry.
And I'll jump in too. So I was also a teacher, and my background is I have my PhD in arts education. And I always say that the arts world and the cannabis world, it's the same bunch of weirdos. And so I kind of love it that way. But I know I'm also on with two other parents and moms, and the executive activity that you do as a parent in your household even is a skill set that is really useful. And there are quite a few folks who are hiring who are just looking for quality individuals who are capable of management and keeping track of things. And I think that that's an important skill as well. I was trying to think if there was any lane that could not be applicable somewhere within the industry, and I'm having a hard time coming up with one, to be honest. Everything, even from transport and load in and load out of things. There's kind of a lane just about everywhere.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think that's one piece that's so interesting about this industry, is that because it is so new, what Caitlein is saying is completely true. There's a lot of folks out there, startups, who are like, oh, you're dependable, you're reliable, you're coachable, and they're willing to actually help you through those things if you don't necessarily have every single skill that they're looking for. It's also one of those industries where, again, everything is needed. And so transportation is a really good one that people don't think about. Data, even if you're good at data analysis, or even just collecting it, or you have an idea for that, that's something that's highly needed within this industry. It's definitely a great industry for folks who are creatives, marketing, branding, even photography. All of those things are highly needed, highly sought after. Because the industry is one where advertising is very difficult. it's a great space to be in if you're a great writer. It's a great space to be in if you can get a following and, you know, become an influencer and have people pay you in order to promote their products. There's a lot of needs in a lot of different places. And of course, most of them, I feel like the biggest opportunity is in ancillary spaces and services, because there's only a finite amount of licenses out there in any and every state. And so really there's so much more opportunity, so many more spaces, so much more need within the ancillary spaces. Even education is a big one that's pretty new to the cannabis industry.
No, and thanks for bringing that up, because a lot of people believe, well, in order to be in the industry, I have to have a license. And like our company doesn't require that license. You know, if you're in packaging, you're in a number of areas. You're not burdened maybe with all the regulations that your customers are. You still have to be mindful of them, but the licensing doesn't necessarily have to be a hurdle you have to cross. That's a great point. And we've brought up transportation a couple times here. I want to turn to Michael Diaz Rivera, who's made some good comments in the Q&A. Has a couple questions. I'm going to take on the most recent one first, Michael, if you don't mind. And Michael's a social equity applicant in Denver. He's interested in, does anybody have advice on how to choose successful partnerships, knowing your value and whether or not to give up equity, which is a great question. I know some people are happy to give up equity and do it quickly, but once it's given up, it's gone. Does anybody have advice on that? Because it's a super question.
I have a little bit of experience with that, only because, you know, I love the topic of the ancillary companies, because we've started a couple from Fairwinds. And, you know, whenever you get into a partnership, and we also have a CBD line as well, I mean, to me, the biggest thing is you're really getting into a relationship. So it's really important to make sure that, you know, you're working with somebody that if you have a disagreement about how, you know, the management, what that's going to look like, you know, how you're going to solve problems and make decisions. To me, it's a really, it's extremely important. So that, to me, the relationship of that partnership is something to really focus on, making sure also that you have your operating plan in place, outlining, you know, all the things I said, like how you're going to make decisions, what you expect from a budget and how that's going to be executed. It's, you know, it's a marriage, and I always like to meet with people numerous times before I get into that marriage.
Yeah, and I would say some of the best advice I got was certainly that this is just like a marriage, and then plan with the divorce in mind, right? So in your operating agreement, really look at what kinds of things would break up this partnership, and how do you account for that and plan for that ahead of time. And then you don't have to worry about that once you sort of get your business up and running. But just really spending the time. I'll echo Wendy on that for sure. Just spend the time.
Absolutely. And I like beginning with the end in mind, because when everybody's getting along, it's easier to talk about those issues, because it's, well, that day will never happen. So, well, let's talk about, you know, what we're getting along, we're sitting here over coffee or whatever, or a joint or whatever the case may be. But making sure to explore those, because once you're not getting along, it's late and it's contentious and it's difficult. And the flip side is important too. If sometimes in this industry, people want you to work for free. Well, not work for free necessarily, but work for a share in their company. And you can find yourself working for something that never materializes. And so many people in this industry have big dreams, and not everybody's going to win, you know, and not everybody runs a good business. You know, there's a level of immaturity in some startups that I don't know if it's higher in this industry than others, but it can be challenging. You know, you can find yourself in a place where people are their own worst enemy for a successful business. And so if you find yourself there, just trying to identify that early and say, hey, is this a space I want to work in? Because certainly there's somebody else who's willing to pay you in cash. You know, don't ever feel like you have to compromise to get in this industry and work on a promise, because promises don't pay rent. You know, promises don't feed your kids. And so some people will sell you a dream, and we want to make sure to be clear and honest about that too. What advice would you all have for somebody looking for their first gig, their first job in cannabis? I know we talked about transferable skills, but anything else you'd want them to be open-eyed about or to be mindful about presenting either way?
Personally,
go ahead, Wendy.
Okay. Personally, I think cannabis is an amazing industry, first of all. If you're wanting to get into the industry, I would say look for companies that you admire, whether it is in the products they produce, how they lead their company, and then reach out to them and see if they have opportunities for internships or to come in and any kind of mentorship, even with, the head of a department, marketing, for example. There's a ton of opportunity here. And I think if you can just get your foot in the door and introduce yourself, send an email and continue to follow up. I know sometimes we will receive emails for internship and might not be able to get back to it right away, but if they're persistent, I also like persistence. So it tells me a lot about the person's character. And, if we can get people in here and share our experiences within the industry, we're always happy to do so. So mentorship opportunities and internships. And then also, as Caitlein was saying, join an association. I think associations are an awesome way to learn more about the industry, the people, the players that are in the industry, and all the supporting companies that are out there. You're on mute.
Caitlein, I don't want to jump in.
Go right ahead. Yeah, I was going to let Trey know that he's muted. That's all.
Brittany, I was going to try to pass the ball to you because I know you've worked for one of the largest cannabis companies in the country, and now you also have been able to start your own venture, and I'm sure they're very different spaces. But
yeah. So when I went to Leafly, I switched my career to some extent around because I was in marketing and I had some sales experience, but I really wanted to get in to the cannabis industry. So I was like, what's out there and what's at least a little bit related to something that I've done before. And so that's where being an account executive, which is a sales role, came in. And it did feel fairly new in some ways, but again, it felt like, because I am pretty outgoing, I already enjoy being around people. I was already customer facing. I was already talking to customers all day within marketing. It worked. And so I would say one thing is be open to things that might be a little bit outside of what you do directly. And then also don't feel like you have to have every single skill that's listed out on that job description. I know that's an issue that really hurts women and hurts people of color too, feeling as if we have to have 100% of what's on the job description or even 80% of it. If you have 60% of what's on that job description, apply for it and just see what happens, because there's all they can say is no. And if they say no, you're going to get a lot of no's before you get a yes anyway. And so do that. I love Wendy's suggestion around reaching out to people. I'll have people who reach out to me even on LinkedIn who will be like, oh, I see that this is what you've done in the past. I want to do this. Like, can we just talk? And that oftentimes leads itself into other opportunities for usually both of us. And so that's a really, really great suggestion. And then another thing is just really focus on what your goals are and what you're trying to gain from any given experience or company. Try not to base what you're trying to do off of an organization, because ultimately, like what happened to me, you could get laid off. The company, as Trey was saying, could shut down. There's a lot of businesses out there that won't survive. And so make sure that when you're going into a position, you're thinking about really what it is that you're trying to gain from that position and where that's going to take you next.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Wendy.
Sorry, Caitlein. No, you go this time.
I'm very patient. We're good.
One thing just real quick to add on to what Brittany said, it's such a true statement that you don't have to be the absolute expert of a specific field. For example, you know, if we have a grower position advertised, we don't necessarily hire the person with the most experience. We look for people, very specific traits, not always the most experience. And sometimes if somebody comes in and says, you know, I've got 25, 30 years of growing, it might not necessarily be what we're looking for, because we like people with a little bit less experience at times because they're not set in their ways. And so when we're really trying to think outside the box, you know, we might look for people that have other skill sets that might contribute just as much. And you can always teach people specific skills. So please don't, you know, not apply for jobs because you think you don't have enough experience.
Yeah, and I want to underline that in a big way, because I cannot tell you how many conversations I have with business owners within our industry that talk about how they look for not specific skill sets, but just folks with an orientation towards learning and hard work and just a growth mindset in general. That's what people are looking for. And this is going to turn into another Cannabis Alliance commercial, but I want to also underscore the fact that just keep showing up. Like Wendy was talking about the persistence, just keep showing up. Look for industry events where you can show up. You know, have your name in folks' inboxes. Like Wendy was saying, I don't know anybody that would be turned off by somebody reaching out to say, hey, I want to learn more. I want to get involved. And if you keep showing up, you will find a home in this industry. I feel like I can guarantee that.
No, and these are all great points, and it's great how each of you had a different perspective on the same point. But you know, don't deselect yourself before somebody else has an opportunity to consider you. And not every job is posted. Absolutely, to kind of go back to something Wendy was saying, not every job is posted, and don't discount the fact that you have less experience at all. I've talked to a number of people as well here, like, look, I can teach somebody, but it's hard to untrain somebody who believes they know the golden way to do it, right? And that stubbornness can get in the way. And so, and then now back to Caitlein too, about participation and showing up. Although I said don't work for free, there's certainly value in putting in some volunteer time at events that are probably going to be fun anyway. And getting to network. I used to think networking, it was like a dirty word to me. It sounded intimidating, and it meant dressing up and having a pocket full of business cards. And in this space, networking can be a lot of fun. You know, they can be open consumption events. They can just be meeting people you've never met. You know, the fact that we all love cannabis, cannabis is the most inclusive community you can belong to, right? Now, whether the industry represents that yet is a whole nother question, but we can get there, and we need to represent the community of consumers that we are, which represent all ages, all races, all geographic locations, all political and religious bents, you know, and that's a beautiful thing. So as you're looking for a company like Wendy was saying that represents your values, or it might have been Brittany, just talking about, you know, looking for a job that fits you. Ask yourself the question, you know, does this company reflect the spirit of cannabis? I mean, this, which is one of loving and communion and bringing people together and helping people to chat with one another and reducing stress. We hope so. Not all of them are by far, but going on if we can go on the networking bit just a little bit, professional organizations are a great way. What are some other ways to get out there and just be seen? Because obviously getting a job is not just landing that interview. Sometimes it's a fortunate conversation. So could you all talk about those fortunate conversations, maybe the places that they might happen, or how to be prepared for that?
Yes, I love this topic. So I'm actually somebody who enjoys networking, but I think it's just because I like parties. So that's a space that I really enjoy, but the pandemic kind of derailed a lot of that. And so when it comes to networking in particular, social media has been so much of what's helped me get some pieces of a green legacy up and running. I I'm also natural Bree on social. And so through that, I was able to make connections with other organizations and with other individuals. There's also other groups like Women Empowered in Cannabis is one where I just did an event for A Green Legacy that was focused on finding PR opportunities for your business. So finding journalists, finding the PR professionals who can get your business in front of other people. And in doing that, it was a matter of, I went to Women Empowered in Cannabis's Facebook group, and I was like, does anybody know of PR people or journalists within the cannabis industry? And that ended up being a comment section with 100 and something comments that were all people recommending people for me. And so even though I already knew a couple of people, I was able to get 2 more people based off of just doing that. I think this industry, but I think every industry is actually like this. If you put yourself out there and if you ask for something, you are going to receive it. I've had people who have reached out. I put a post up about the fact that I was trying to fill out a grant, or I was trying to finish out a grant. And someone random who owns a coffee shop in Seattle was like, I used to be a grant writer. Like, let me know how I can help you. And I was like, it keeps happening. There's been other ventures that I've been on prior to being in the cannabis industry. And every single time I've met one person, they've always connected me to someone else. They've always connected me to another resource. And so I think a lot of it is just putting yourself out there, and it can feel really vulnerable and it can feel very scary, but it's incredibly, incredibly important to just reach out to people, even if you don't have a following, even if you're having to find somebody's email, even if you're having to go to LinkedIn, just find the person that you're trying to reach out to and do it.
Great point. And LinkedIn is free. If you're not participating, it's a great network. I recommend, like when I didn't know anybody in the industry at all, I just changed my profile on LinkedIn. You have to do that cannabis coming out moment. And I reached out to Vivian McPeak that runs HempFest here. And I said, look, I don't know anybody in this industry, but I really want to participate. He said, well, come volunteer with us. We need volunteers all year long. And so the opportunities absolutely exist. Anybody else on that front on just connecting and finding your CannaFam?
Yeah, and certainly social media, actually Clubhouse, if you're able to get on there, there are lots of excellent conversations happening on Clubhouse as well. And that's just an easy way to get your voice heard. You know, so the Alliance, we have things like happy hours, for example, where it's online because of pandemic, so it's not as awesome, but that also kind of makes it easier for consumption, given our consumption laws here in Washington State. And you'll have everything from CEOs to bud tenders to just aficionados who just want to come and chat about weed. And that's a great mixture of folks. I was thinking about, we were at a Juneteenth celebration last weekend, and at our booth, we had the CEO of Leafly, we had a bud tender, we had, you know, the community coming through and having important conversations and nerdy conversations about favorite strains, but then also political work that we want to continue to push forward. And again, back to that, just showing up. If you keep showing up in spaces, you'll get to start having those conversations, and conversations with people like Vivian McPeak or Wendy Hull or Brittany Packer. And I love that point, Brittany, about how we pass folks on too. We make sure that there's an introduction to the next as well. And that's one of the things that I adore about this industry.
Me too.
Yeah, absolutely. Wendy, anything to add on that? I just want to make sure you had an opportunity.
Yeah, you know, one of the kind of the most, every once in a while I'll do this, and I'll just go on to Google or whatever platform, and I'll just type in presentations or speakers in, say, Washington State and cannabis. And then there were actually some presentations that I didn't know existed, and some groups that I didn't know existed. So by doing that, it was, you know, 2018, 19 that I was doing this pre-COVID. And it showed me a lot of presentations that I didn't know were happening. And so one of them here was actually at Clark College. So I drove over there and just listen to what they had to say on cannabis. And it's just an easy way to see what's going on and see if, if there's an area that you can go participate in.
Great point. And there's so much going on, and some people might feel that they're getting a late start here. And I'd absolutely want to let you know you're not getting a late start. You might be living in a bubble because a lot of people who are already doing this, but we're so much ahead of so much of the country, and so much is going to change. We know like the Nabisco of weed is coming, right? Whole Foods wants to sell it on the shelves. They said as much. So things are going to change a lot, and this is a beautiful time to get in and participate when so many opportunities are with family-owned operations that are still relatively small, with people who are just after their passion over profits and are willing to put in some tough years to make it work. And I'm proud to know so many of those people. Not people on the front of magazines driving Lamborghinis. You see that, and yeah, that's out there too. But that doesn't feed me, right? That doesn't get me excited about this industry. And there's so many good, exciting stories. And if you're not following Brittany Packer on social media, it'll add a smile to your life. It's fun. And I'm not a parent, but I learned a little bit more empathy about, you're talking about dealing with your critics. And if you can deal with a 5-year-old who won't take no for an answer, I'm sure you can deal with a lot.
Yes. I think we can all attest to that now.
I want to point out, Evelyn put in the link that Pimp Your LinkedIn Profile event is coming up. That's the August webinar. Last Prisoner Project is doing so much good work. I mean, not only to help people get out of prison, but what's the next step? And the next step is just as critical as helping people have these conversations and helping them be comfortable in the space and helping them say, hey, look, we care about you, because we know there are people making life savings. Other people are still serving life sentences for the same substance, and that itself is a crime. So Evelyn, thank you for what you're doing and all the opportunities you're providing. I continue to learn from your organization and from you and from all of you on this call. So thanks for the hard work you're putting in. I want to make sure Brittany just did it, but make sure you also are putting in any links that might not have already been included so people can find you. When it comes to LinkedIn, come in and follow some people that have already been there, and then go into our followers and find some of those people. It doesn't mean we know all those people or can endorse them, but it might give you a starting point so you can say, oh, well, I never thought about adding this person or that company and that sort of thing. So Evelyn, I want to kind of pitch the ball back to you and see if you want to talk about upcoming events or add anything to what we've been chatting about.
I'm over here suffering with a hiccup, so bear with me if it all happens at once, but I think I might have conquered. So yes, in August, I was able to connect from LinkedIn. This is the power of LinkedIn, that I'm sorry, I'll forget his title, but he is employed at LinkedIn in an executive way, and is volunteering his time to walk us through how to, and this was his language, not mine, pimp your profile. And in that workshop, where actually I've left my LinkedIn account as it is, and I thought I had done a really good job. But he is telling me that there's so many improvements that I could make. And so in that workshop, the second Saturday of August, we will walk through how to improve my already existing LinkedIn. I've been listening to the conversation so many times. I wanted to butt in like, yes, and yes, because I have connected with folks. I've had folks, and I, in my opinion, am like a small piece of this industry, but I've had folks say, hey, I want to do what you do. Can we have a conversation? So and I'm saying yes. And there's so many people that are willing, like Brittany said, to hop on the phone and give that conversation, that piece of advice. It's just a welcoming community. And so I think LinkedIn is a great place to do that. There was one other thing that I was like, yes. Oh, one of the questions about choosing a good partner. I will say social equity, in the way that it is built, does have like a predatory way about it, right? And so you can get into relationships where folks are really just wanting a piece of your application, and you got that application because you have a felony, because you grew up in a disadvantaged community, and that application is worth a lot. And so when choosing your partners, as we're talking about, I love coming into a marriage with a prenup, right? Like, I love coming in there thinking, well, what if this doesn't work out? And being in that position and having friends, really close friends who are in the process of selecting partners, I will say, select a partner that doesn't think they're doing you a favor. Because the folks who think that they are doing you a favor or do not value or respect your position in this industry. And so that is just like my big takeaway, right? When you think that, when someone thinks that they're doing you a favor, or they automatically assume that you are beneath them, and you want to find a partner that is willing to sit at the table with you. And so, great conversation. I took notes. I thought I was dropping comments, and I think I was just sending them to Jeff over there. So great conversations. Thank you all for the information. We do have what month are we in? June. So second Saturday of July will be how and when to disclose your felony. And August will be pimping your LinkedIn profile. Also, Last Prisoner Project, we have resources for our constituents, like the Academy of Cannabis Science. I always get the two mixed up. Scholarships, along with some other great cannabis related education scholarships. We have these webinars. We have the Cannabis job board, where you can go and access the jobs that are there, take this information that you've learned today about your transferable skills, and look for those positions. I wanted to list in the chat, Brittany, you listed, like, there's marketing, branding, there's photography. Like, I have had to hire all of those people in the last month in just building my brand, a design team, a photographer, and a videographer for content creation. All of this in the cannabis space without touching the plant. And so the lanes are wide open. I hope that everyone was encouraged as I was, and just thank you all so much for your time on a Saturday. Like, I really appreciate Saturday time, because I know, especially as moms, like, there's a lot going on. And so I really appreciate Saturday time, and just thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation. It was great to meet you, Caitlein and Wendy.
Same, Brittany.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate.
This is awesome. Caitlein?
Thank you. May I plug a small thing? Our next webinar, a great place to show up, is on Wednesday, and Wendy is actually one of our panelists, and we're talking about DOH compliant product. Guaranteed there will be industry folks there, so we'd love to see you.
Yes, showing up. I got that, because I think I sent that to just Jeff in the chat. Just showing up is big. Like, just show up, show up, show up. I'm learning, and because I'm not a show up person, I'm like, what can I do behind my computer screen? What can I do? That's not a good habit to have when you are trying to create a lane, though. So show up everywhere. Lots of the same folks in the same rooms, and you will begin to become recognized. It's such a small community, and the people who are showing up show up all the time. Make yourself one of those people.
And you know, Evelyn, so funny story. Once you told your story earlier today, I was like, I know that her face is familiar, but I don't know where from. And it's because I saw a video of you randomly on Facebook one day. Like, I was like going through my random like Facebook videos that just come up. There's a few people that I follow that I really like their content, and your story came up. And so that's where I know you from. So you've been showing up without even knowing it.
And Trey, you spoke to earlier, Trey, you talking about not folks wanting you to show up for free, right? And you're like, oh, but there's value, there's worth in my time. And then there is value in showing up, and we'll get to the point to where showing up will get us money in our pockets. But until then, showing up, the value in that is the network, is in being recognized, is in really building your space. So that was a great example. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Everyone have a happy Saturday.
Happy Saturday.
Thank you so much. Have a
Bye.
good day.
Stay cool, you all.